Good morning. I'm gonna wait a few minutes. We're supposed to be 17 signed up for this. I'm happy to do a more intimate group than that, but let me just give a few minutes for any stragglers to wander in.
Yeah. Oh.
Hey, Dave Hurlock.
It is.
Doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter.
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I mean, the way it's looking, I'm glad you came, man. I'd be doing this thing by myself.
You want me to get more people to come in?
I think they'll be coming in a sec. First session of the morning, you know. Yeah.
I'm putting Photon CTs.
Really? Well, yeah. Part of my introduction then, you're going to be the guy I'm going to be talking about, part of my introduction.
I've done a lot of research on it, but I want someone to just talk to me.
Well,
Very.
I've been around. I worked for Varian and Varex for a long time in the imaging component side. Yeah.
I used to work with just doing. I used to use various lights.
Yeah. Well, I ran that. I mean, I was the site manager for that facility. I might as well get started here. So I'm going to introduce myself to you. I might as well introduce myself to everybody, right? Yeah, that's fine.
A few announcements. First of all, welcome to ICE 2024. We're happy y'all are here. A couple of reminders about today. After the morning education sessions, there's this one and then 11. Please join us in the registration foyer for an ice break where lunch will be Friday, and then education will resume at 1:30. And the keynote presentation is today at 2:45 in the theater across from registration. Right over there, there'll be big signs out. And then the exhibit hall grand opening is today from 4 to 6:30. We'll have light bites and drink tickets. That'll be handed out as you enter the exhibit hall. And then just a few housekeeping notes. At the conclusion of the session, there should be a QR code at the end of the presentation where you can provide presenter survey feedback. If you could please do that, it helps us improve our education sessions at the shows. And then we have a new system for tracking. So at the end of the session today, I'll be back in here and I'll just scan your badges, and that's how you'll get your CE credits if you're seeking those. And those certificates will be emailed next week. I think that's it. But David Hurlock.
Okay. Thank you, Sydney.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name's David Hurlock. I'm basically a sales guy. Okay. I have no dog in the hunt with photon counting detector now. I worked for Varian and Varex, and I sold components for a long time. So I learned about this because I'm very interested in keeping up with the technology. But my perspective is that of a sales guy. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a physicist. And it often happens, I'm speaking to a crowd that may know more about the subject matter than I do. So if I say anything wrong, and then we'll all learn something together. Okay, that's completely acceptable. So right now, what I do, I have a load station, X-Ray America. The Charleston facility that used to make X-ray tubes started as Inarray, then became Varian Charleston, and then became, or Varian Inarray, and then became Varex Charleston. Varian closed. When it did, it let 20 people go with combined 270-year experience. I started X-Ray America to get the band back together. So we're a load station for X-ray tubes using components we import from IE in Italy. But I want to keep up on the technology, so I decided to do this presentation. I've done it before. I'm going to try something a little different this time. We'll see how it works. See if this works. There we go. So we're in Charleston, South Carolina, and this is one of our locals. I don't want to give you the impression now, this is my, okay? So we have a lot of, I'm not, because I want to show off our local fauna. That's because my kids call me a lawn fanatic, okay? So I'm going to use my lawn as an analogy to try and explain photon counting. I'll get into that. It's kind of an avant-garde way to do it, but we'll see how it works. So what I'm going to try and how do photon counting detectors work? And the only thing I can really do is contrasting them to the current CT detectors, which are referred to as energy integrating detectors. So throughout the presentation, you'll see EID for energy integrating detectors. That's sort of the current or previous technology, depending where you're at. And then photon counting detectors, so PCD. So those two will show up on the slide so that we can kind of stay in tune of exactly which kind of. I'm going to talk about what are the advantages, why the buzz in the industry, and what are the challenges to adoption in this part. Somebody that's with these technologies, one of the largest AM groups, and some of it, and it doesn't sound correct. Please bring it up, and I'm interested in learning as well. Okay, so what's a photon? So is it a wave? Is it a particle? Well, the truth is it's both. Of a wave, it's got a particle. It's the smallest bit of energy that exists. That's how they describe it. So we're constantly being bombarded by photons, okay? Light that we have in this room are photons, or low energy photons. X produces a high energy photon, okay? So, whole range from photon energy level, things like infrared to very high energy, so can't see things like X-rays. Now, onto this. People, I bring this up not because I am speaking down this crowd, this audience. People who should know better have asked me this question. So we're talking about photons and not protons. So protons are radiation therapy, the advancement in radiation therapy. Photons are completely different. Okay. So this slide is not particularly clear. It does give you an idea. So the stapes is the smallest bone in the human body. Okay, it's part of the ear. But with our current, it's a, if you can see this better, it would just look like a blurred image. Here you can counting detector, same stapes, detector stapes, and you can make out the shape. It's a shape. And this is really what, you know, why we're moving in that direction, why that technology is interesting. So energy detector, so how these work, okay? So it's a multi-part process. Yeah, photons, right? They pass through a slider and they're turned into light, okay? These are boxes, okay? The light goes into the box and then optical reflectors, so that they kind of concentrate that light to actually produce an image. And if these are photodiodes. So the photon, the light is concentrated by these reflectors, and it stops some of the scatter, right, from other light, turned into an electrical signal by the photodiodes. The electrical signal feeds an ASIC chip, which then turns into a digital signal. Digital signal and turned into an image. Right? So we have basically a three process. Photons, okay, the photons hit the detector. Now the detector has an anode at 1 kV, 1 kV voltage between the anode and the cathode. And it directly, the electric signal feeds the ASIC chip, and the ASIC chip the signal. So we have a two-part process. We've taken out a step, and this is sometimes referred in other types of detectors as direct imaging. Okay, because you're taking out that version in light and light into the electric signal and electric signal to the digital signal. So disadvantages of that first detector I showed you, the energy integrating detector, compared to a photon counting detector. You get a dose because those reflectors on the side, comb filters, they're catching some of the X-ray photons and eliminating them from actually making a signal. They have larger pixels, you know, they're kind of a box, okay? You have electronic noise integrated in the signal, and primarily because it's a three-part process. So every time you do a conversion, you're adding noise, and so you're integrating noise into that signal. And single energy. So all the photons that turn into light create a single energy footprint or a single energy ultimately which comes to the digital and becomes a detector. So these are the disadvantages. I'm going to explain this. So the X-rays come in, they hit the photodiodes, they turn into light in the scintillator. The light hits the photodiodes, and this optical reflector is part of it. Again, this is kind of like a box, okay? So these reflector walls block the X-ray. So what happens with a detector is you get all these photons. These photons, same way in a photon counting detector. You look like you're ready to say bullshit. No? Okay. Okay. I'm waiting for it. All this is captured as one signal. So you've got energy levels and you've got noise, okay, that's going into your signal. So a couple things that I learned from this slide is KeV is kilo electron volts, which is how they describe lowest energy, okay, energy in this bits. And in this time, this is in nanoseconds, 1,000 nanoseconds. A nanosecond is a billionth of a second. Okay, so just trying to give you an idea of the amount of data that this is and the time that this is taking to happen. Now, in contrast, with a photon counting detector, what happens is each of these signal pulses gives you different input into your signal. You still have a noise threshold, which actually is lower in these because you have two conversions instead of three, two-part process instead of three for the conversion. But these signal pulses can be read, okay? And each signal pulse has a different energy level, and the energy level can be determined, stored. So what this allows is inherent spectral imaging capability. So you can take the energy levels, you can separate the signals, right, at high energy level, and you can differentiate, you can take out the noise, and you can differentiate the different energy levels to give you spectral imaging capability. Okay.
So it's like dual energy then?
Exactly like dual energy, only it can be dual energy or more. I mean, really you can get to 4, what I've heard so far is that you can get to 4 energy levels.
With spectral, you can get more energy.
More with photon counting detectors, yes. You can get more more differentiation of energy levels. And so you can get in things like subtraction, you can get more subtraction. The big key to this is you can get more soft tissue differentiation. So you have high energy photons and low energy photons. And with the energy integrating detectors, they're all incorporated into one, and the signal is biased to the highest energy. So you don't really differentiate, get any input from the lower energy photons. For the people that joined us, I'd be happy to go back at the end of this, just go back and go through the first couple of slides, make these a little bit clear. So with photon, and just for the new people came in, so I'm talking about energy integrating detectors, which is a current technology, and photon counting detectors, which is the newer technology. Photon detectors reach photon energy, and it actually gives an impact or a signal from lower energy as well. Okay, so you don't lose basically the value or the image value for the lower energy electrons or photons. So this is an explanation of this. So you have the energy levels coming in. You can define your thresholds, and you can keep counts of every threshold. Okay, so you can actually you don't lose the information that you're getting from these lower photons. So from the photons that are X-ray photons that are material, okay, and producing lower energy when they get to the receptor, you're still getting that information. This is what allows for more soft tissue differentiation, which allows for a better image, both in terms of resolution and in terms of sensitivity. So the advantages of the photon counting detector. Before I get into this, I'm going to get into my analogy. So for the people who came in, I introduced myself. I'm from Charleston, and we have locals, okay? And what I want to show you is my lawn in this slide. So my kids call me a lawn fanatic, okay? So I'm just absolutely love my lawn. I have a beautiful green lawn. And when I put in my watering system, my irrigation system, okay, what I did is I put some tuna cans out, open tuna cans, and I put them around the lawn, and I measured the water and made sure all my lawn was getting water. But to explain this, let me put this image in your mind. So suppose I wanted to know every inch of my lawn how much water it was getting, okay? So imagine with a energy integrating detector, I put out whole coffee cans, okay? The rain comes down, coffee cans get water in them. And I can say, okay, good, in this coffee can, right, which is about 6 inches across, I got an inch of water. Okay, that gave me information about how much water I got. Okay, but it wouldn't be very granular. There might be a difference in one side of the coffee can to the other, and I'd miss some. If the water was coming from the side, I'd miss some water. I wouldn't get all the water in the coffee can. Okay, so that's kind of the image I'm trying to get in your mind for the energy integrating detector. It's good, plenty of data, plenty of information, okay? But now imagine, instead of that, I measure every raindrop, okay? Big rain, and I can tell the difference between big raindrops and small raindrops, okay? And imagine the information that would get me about the water on my lawn, okay? So that's what I see as the difference in a very broad sense between energy integrating detectors, which are perfectly good. Obviously, we've been using them for years. Fantastic CTs, using those traditional detectors versus the new photon counting detectors. Okay, so back to reality instead of my analogy of my lawn. So in broad sense, the advantages of photon counting detectors in a CT or not in a CT are that you can get smaller. Again, that idea of can, a tuna can versus a coffee can, or even measuring every rain. You can take out the electronic noise because you can differentiate the different energy levels. So you can subtract at 25 keV, you can subtract the noise right out of your signal. Okay, so it gives you a much cleaner signal, which also means that you can lower dose. It's got intrinsic spectral sensitivity, so you can actually count the different energy levels so that you can subtract one energy level from another to get that soft tissue differentiation I was talking about. And you get an equal contribution of lower energy quanta, which means those lower energy photons that are hitting the detector, you still get that data. Okay, so again, it adds to it enables a much more granular image. So these are some images. Hopefully these are a little clearer than my Stapes slide. Yeah, but this gives you an idea. So photon counting detectors get a really detail in these times. And you can see with energy integrating detector, you still get a crisp, usable crisp clarity. The photon counting is crisper, has less blurring, but there's more clutter from grain boundary. So you're getting so much data that you do get some clutter in the image with these photon counting detectors. So why the buzz in the market? I'm going to start to editorialize here. So in CT scanners, we're up to what, 640 slice CT scanners. Okay, where do we go from here? I mean, this is kind of like the war back in the image intensifier days where we got to, I think it was 17-inch image intensifiers, and there's no point for them anymore. There's nowhere to go. So why the buzz? Well, the OEMs need a market driver. Okay, they're going to come out with a new technology because they want to get the latest and greatest technology. They want to convince their healthcare providers that they need this, better, greater technology. Somebody's got to drive the technology for their business model. So we've got Siemens with the Negatom Alpha. And Glenn, is that what you're installing?
Some,
What other ones are you installing?
well, the Philips Spectral, but they'll tell you it's different, but it's photon count.
Okay. So I didn't realize that the Philips had come out. So this slide is a little bit dated, but Samsung says they have this Omniton Elite. Okay. He has deep silicone technology, okay, which hasn't hit CCT, and they're currently accumulating knowledge regarding both the technical and clinical benefits. And United Imaging, in the near future, they'll launch a proton counting. So everybody's moving in this direction.
Philips, I put in this
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, good. It's not so bad then. Now, I think that, and this is really raw editorializing, that probably the best use of this technology is not in these. Okay, and it's because, first of all, CTs are already so freaking good. Okay, so advanced, and the imaging is so good. I don't know what's going to be gained with photon counting detectors and CTs. And there's so much data coming out of these that I don't know how we're going to take advantage of all that data into a signal, into an image that makes sense. To an image, it seems like it's overshoot for the amount of value we're going to get out of the images, because you have billions and billions and billions of photons, and you're counting them all. You can't do it. There's just not enough computational ability to do it all. So there's some kind of a winnowing down of this data. And so I'm not sure that we're taking full advantage of it with CT. Where I think photon counting is going to be very, very interesting, and this is a trend that I see of very innovative thing that's happening smaller scale. Um, big advances in breast imaging, and I think anything where you're talking about, you know, tissue, that kind of differentiation, I think that photon counting detector in the marketplace. I don't know that I don't see the case for the other thing about these is that you've got to make these work. And I only just over this. There's a 1 kV gradient across the entire panel. Okay, and anytime you're trying to maintain a high voltage gradient across a panel, you've got challenges. Okay, and I'm aware, for instance, of uses a linear detector, which is referred to as direct imaging. Different, but it's still direct imaging. But they keep a 5 kV gradient across the panel. And that's where those panels fail, okay? Because you can't maintain that forever. You're going to get tiny arcs, and the arcs are going to turn into bigger arcs, and the panels degrade. So early in their panels, the technology is called selenium detectors. And early days of selenium detectors, they were lucky to get a year out of them because of this gradation. Now, since they've modified their power supplies, they've modified their panel, and now it's a very stable product. I'm not criticizing the product, but the concept is that it's very, very hard to maintain that high voltage gradient across a panel of any size. So I would guess, as if I could predict the future, that that's where we're going to see detector failures in the future. And so anybody that's a technology manager, I would say make sure that your warranty on your detector particularly is a strong warrant as you're putting these in contracting. What do you think about that, Glenn?
I agree. I do think what I'm seeing whenever we did the install over the edge, just the independent workstations for oncology, where you're doing really, really minor tissue variances and the spectral counts, you can change those thresholds and you can see things that you couldn't see with CT averaging.
Well, thank you very much for that explanation, which was much clearer than what I said, but that's exactly the value.
You look at the lung and you can see a nodule in a regular CT, but if you have spectral, you set those thresholds and you can kind of dissect the tumor without dissecting the tumor.
Yes.
And then that spectral database where someone has figured out what energies equal what tissue densities is, it's there. I don't know how mature it is. It's pretty impressive when someone actually shows you and zeroes in on it. See, look at that. I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know I can see something I couldn't see before.
Yeah, and you're talking about CT particularly? Yes. Yeah, okay.
And it's all in the post-processing. You still acquire the image the same. Like you said, there's this trove of data. But because of that database, you're saying, oh, I only need to look at this because I know lung tumors typically are in these thresholds. So you start whittling down that data so your reprocessing doesn't take 3 days. So.
Elegantly put. Thank you very much. So what the manufacturers will tell you, besides what Glenn just explained to us, was there are some advantages. Dose is lower. You don't need as high dose because you're not filling those boxes in the energy integrating detector with light. You're basically just counting the individual photons directly. So that can be a 40 to 50% lower dose. Smaller pixels, better resolution. You can really lower, and part of the dose reduction is in eliminating that noise. So you don't have to get the dose above the noise, because you're eliminating the noise because you're eliminating those energy values that are where noise occurs. You can get, as Glenn just explained really, really well, you can get spectral imaging with one detector and much better soft tissue differentiation. Need less imaging contrast. And the disadvantage is the dose rate is limited by the max count rate. So it's easy to flood these detectors. You have an upper dose. You can't just keep raising the dose to get a better image. It's not the way these react. And it's a huge computational burden. And so I think that we're probably not getting the it's just too much data. And again, if you put the dose too high, you end up flooding them. Yeah.
But for dose rate, the energy integrating, that has the same limit, right? That's not, what I'm trying to say is the proton counting, that limitation, the dose rate limitation is equal between those two, right? Aren't you gonna flood with the?
Well, you can flood, but it takes a lot higher dose. And the reason is you've got these comb filters, you know, that are kind of the sides of the boxes, the sides of these coffee cans that are eliminating a lot of the photons. So you're cutting down on the photons. You can, sure, you can flood a CT detector, but it takes a much higher dose, and energy integrating detector.
Yeah, and in the old days, there wasn't software to give you suggestions. You have to intentionally flood a Hurlock detector. You would just, you're cooking your patient, basically.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, sure. I mean, yes, you can absolutely do it.
That's why you have-
But apples to apples, the same dose wouldn't flood the detector. Yeah, and see, it's innately inefficient. The current detectors you need, because you're collecting this light, so you're through the scintillator, you're acquiring light from photons, and you need enough light to actually make your photodiodes turn it into an electric signal. So it's kind of a integrated inefficiency in that. I mean, obviously it works great. We've got great CT scanners, but you know, in the conception of the process, it's not quite as efficient.
Explain more, maybe it's what you were saying too, Glenn, with the spectral, with one detector, if you're having multiple energies, how is that one detector separating? Is it just in the post-processing?
Well, you're counting, and Glenn, feel free, but
Well, I liked your analogy of the grass, where I thought you were.
Thank you.
Is that your grass grows up. So for analog detectors, you take a 2x2 of grass, and that's your detector. Okay, so if a photon hits that 2x2, it makes one signal. But photon counting, count each blade of grass in that 2x2, and each of those has a value.
Right, but
And so each of those does have a count. It has a value associated with it. So it's not a distinct value as it goes through that soft tissue or bone. And so you get this much data, individual pixels versus this much data, one value.
yeah, see, when the energy levels in KeV, each one is measured. They aren't integrated. So in the energy integrating detector, all these individual photons with different energy levels, right? They go into one signal. The noise is incorporated. All this is one signal. So you have some low energy photons, you have some high energy photons, but what it reads is this high energy. All right. So it reads this whole bit. All this is what goes into that box, right, to create a signal. Whereas in the photon counting, you're measuring the different energy levels, right? These are distinct signals. So you can measure all the, 90 keV signals in this threshold. You can measure all the 75s, all the 50s, and then you can eliminate anything below 25 as noise. So
If you have, this is your tumor, this is your soft tissue. And the detector's down here. For analog, the detector, the beam goes through, and all of this gets one signal. And as the tube moves, of course, it starts building shade. In photon, what hits the edge of the tumor gets a value, and what hits the air right side the tumor gets a value, and starts building a picture as it goes around. So you can see it would be cleaner by the time it's done.
So I guess maybe where I'm getting confused, like, again, looking at dual energy, you have maybe two detectors. One is going to capture the low energy versus the high energy, but with one detector, it is able to differentiate those multiple energies.
and yeah, and this is why, because it's keeping counts of each energy level and taking that and forming the signal. So it's counting all it's eliminating your noise at low energy, however you set your thresholds, and Glenn was talking about that somebody had to figure this out. You set, everything that goes above set threshold 3, that gets counted.
As a year, for example.
Yeah, and everything above threshold 2, that gets counted.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the individual counts, and you can look and subtract one from the other to see exactly the different properties makeup of the tissue.
Source is extremely accurate.
Yeah.
Extremely.
Yeah, because there's definitely multiple energies
Yes.
that you can differentiate versus if you follow and do it.
Like I said, the manufacturers are pushing this new technology. If you've never had it, the question is, do you need it for what you're trying to accomplish? If it's a run and gun CT, do you need an EFM?
Yeah, but I mean, for a trauma, emergency room trauma, you don't need. I mean, yeah. Yeah, but again, if you're an oncologist, maybe it makes sense, particularly for lung and soft tissue. Yeah.
And the differentiation with pyramid is the same type.
I have to admit that I can't speak to nuclear med. Yeah, I understand, diagnostic imaging and X-ray, and I just.
Well, it's just scintillation value, something detector head instead of detector, CT detector. You're injecting someone and you're detecting that injection, where this is an externally created beam and an externally positioned detector. With nuclear, you have an internally injected isotope and an external detector.
Okay, so, I mean, this is basically what I have. For the people that came in, I just want to clarify some of the early stuff, and you're welcome to stay or leave or whatever. So we're talking about photon counting. What is a photon? So a photon is the smallest bit of energy. We're constantly being bombarded by photons, and the light is a photon of a relatively low energy. There's low energy photons in infrared that are bombarding us all the time that you can't see, you can't process. And what we're talking about with X-ray are very high energy photons. And a photon is not a proton. So a proton is used in oncology and radiation therapy, the newest technology. A photon, again, is this bit of light. It's not a wave, it's not a particle, it's got properties of both. So to explain photon counting detectors, I had to compare them to the existing technology, which are energy integrating detectors. This picture does not show very well in this, blown up this big, but this is the stapes, which is the smallest bone in the human body. And this is the stapes. And if there was a better image, this would be a little bit clearer. That you could barely see. In this one, you can see it's kind of a stirrup shaped bone. So the existing energy integrating detectors, and I use this symbol so you're sure which slide is which, what I'm talking about. Energy integrating detectors. You have a scintillator. You have what I refer to as kind of a box here. You have a photodiode, and the box has optical reflectors. So the photon comes in, and the scintillator gets turned to light. The light's collected to make a signal, and then the photodiode turns that signal into a electrical signal through an ASIC gets turned into a digital signal. But they have these optical reflectors so they can get enough light, because this is an inherently inefficient process, to get enough light for the photodiodes to produce the image. So it's a three-part process. The photons turn into light. The light gets converted through a photodiode into an electrical signal. Electrical signal through an ASIC chip gets turned into a digital signal. So it's a three-part process. And every time you convert like this, you're adding noise to a signal. So photon counting detectors could be referred to as direct imaging, in that you're not doing that intermittent step of turning it into light and turning the light into a electric signal. So the photons themselves produce an electric signal, and these photon detectors have a 1 kV voltage across the entire panel. Okay, and that's how they're able to detect. So the disadvantage of the EID detector is a dose penalty, and then home filters. You need a higher dose, larger pixels. You have electronic noise integrated into the signal. I'm going to explain that, and it's a single energy. You get the higher energy signal. You don't get any information from those lower energy photons. So going back to this to clarify that, this optical reflector is what causes the higher dose. These reflector walls block X-ray. So they're blocking the X-ray photons, so you're losing a lot of photons. Okay, so in integrating detector, okay, you've got the photons are coming in the same way, right? But what happens is all those photons get integrated into one signal. Okay, so you've got low energy photons, you've got high energy photons, you've got noise, is all going into one signal into that detector. So in a nanosecond is a billionth of a second. So we're talking about, and KeV is kilo electron volts. So to give you an idea of the energy we're talking about, energies we're talking about, that's how these small photon energies are measured, and the time we're talking about. And we're talking about an incredibly fast reaction, incredibly fast collection of signal. So the difference is that because they measure each photon, you get the signal pulses from each one. And any noise that's generated, which is less because it's a two-part process, not a three-part process, any noise can be subtracted because you can subtract out these energy levels because you're differentiating energy. And so here we talked about the thresholds. And so here you can see the photons give you different thresholds, different energies, right? And that's all collected and counted. So the electron integrating detector averages the energy. So it gives you that, okay, this is the image that we got. I mean, this is the, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the photo that I got. This is the single, what it looked like. All the energy, all the photons, all the signals incorporated into one signal. Whereas photon counting detector, you're getting each individual energy level that you're getting is being counted. And all the information from those lower energy photons. So each of the thresholds gets a count. And so they can actually differentiate these different energy levels. About, okay. You're welcome. Any questions?